This is Faith Matters, and I'm David Hennessy. We all look for happiness. We all want to be happy. Many of us can spend years looking for perfect contentment and happiness in business, possessions, physical fitness, sex, and so on. But after chasing our tails for years, we hit some kind of crisis or other, and our world comes crashing down, and we find that we come up empty. The last place we look for real contentment and real peace is the first place we should have looked for. That is with Jesus Christ, who is the way, the truth, and the life. Only when we find Him do we discover what millions of people over the centuries have discovered, which was summed up by St. Augustine with these beautiful words: "Our hearts were made for Thee and are restless until they find their rest in Thee." Then there are good living people who by their very spiritual nature will look for happiness in an area which appears very attractive and spiritually elevating, but turn out to be highly toxic and damaging. In seeking liberation, good people seeking help for themselves and others end up becoming captives of the powers of darkness. Who better to understand this world than somebody who has experienced great suffering by her incursion into the world of New Age practices? I have with me in the studio today Patricia McNally. You will all know her through her programme Sounds for Sunday, but she is also the Wonder Woman here of the studio who keeps everything running and is normally behind the controls. Well, Patricia, you told me something about your life that struck me. I wonder, could you tell us your story?
Yeah, thanks, David, and it's an honour to be here with you this evening. I'm very happy to share my story with you in the hope that it would help other people to get a closer look into this area, the dark area of New Age, which I was involved in for probably more than 15 years. I didn't intentionally set out to find, other sources of happiness or anything like that. I suppose I was kind of a curious child growing up. If I was to try and pinpoint where it all started, it probably would have been something as simple as reading horoscopes, or as a teenager growing up, which would have led me on then to kind of delving into maybe tea leaves as a kind of a joke at home. You'd be looking at the tea leaves in the cup and stuff like that. And I started going to fortune tellers. I also went to a lot of psychic fairs, and anything to do with all this kind of stuff. I was always drawn to it, probably out of my curiosity to find out more about it or to know what it was about. And I didn't intentionally think it was anything wrong, or I didn't want to turn away from my faith. I was brought up in a very Catholic home. My mother was very involved with the church and was a church envelope collector, and I used to go around with her weekends. And my aunt was priest housekeeper. I had two aunts who were priest housekeepers, so I grew up very much in the church around priests and was very connected to God in that way. An annual pilgrimage to Knock every year, the Miraculous Medal devotion on a Monday night, Holy Hour devotion on a Thursday night, regular mass. So I was surrounded by faith and people of faith in my life as I grew up. So how I went down this road, curiosity, and I suppose the search. There must have been a thirst inside me for something more. It was the search for a closer relationship with God, but I was trying to find that in other areas. I mean, I grew up with the guardian angel prayer, and I knew I had a guardian angel, but I didn't realise there were two types of angels. There were the holy angels and there were the fallen angels. I didn't realise that at the time, which I realise that now. So I thought all angels were the same, and it must be good. And if it's to do with angels, it must be good because angels are from God. I slipped into a deeper level of darkness through following that particular area as well, and then on to bioenergy healing, which was another area. And from there, I could name all of the rest of New Age stuff that I went deeper and deeper and deeper into.
Would you name it? Name the different things you did one by one?
Yeah. From angel readings, I did a course in tarot. Turned up one night to do an astrology course at a place that I thought I was doing an astrology course, and there happened not to be an astrology course on. It was tarot reading, which was something I didn't really want to do, but it was the only course that happened to be on that night when I went, so I stayed for it because I had travelled to the place. So that was a whole other area that led me into getting deeper involved in tarot cards, angel readings, Reiki, bioenergy healing. I studied for a few years because I was drawn to trying to help people who are suffering and who had illnesses, and I thought that this was a natural way that maybe they could be helped. So my intention there was genuine, although I didn't realise that this was under the umbrella of New Age as well. So Reiki, little bit of yoga. One thing led on to another. Or I knew it. I was I was caught in this web of New Age.
And when you say you were caught in the web of New Age, when did you begin to feel anything negative about it? Did you ever sort of find something like suspiciously there could be evil behind anything you were doing?
There was one thing, and I went to a meditation evening, and there was something there that just didn't resonate with me. Talking about ascended masters and all these ascended masters, and there was many of them. And Jesus was just one of these ascended masters. And I thought to myself, this just doesn't sit with me. Jesus just doesn't blend in with all of these ascended masters. And still, it wasn't enough for me to break away from it.
And they didn't mention that Jesus is God?
No, didn't mention that Jesus was God, no. That was probably one of the red flags, kind of. But I was so clouded by it. I was so, you could almost say trance-like. Maybe I was addicted to it and I didn't realise it at the time. You're travelling along this road, you're wanting to find out more about it so that you can be of help to people.
Yeah, I've read that that's a characteristic of people who get into New Age, looking for help for oneself but also for other people. There was very good people get into this. Were you married when you got into all this? Was it well, you said as a schoolgirl you started?
Yeah, as a teenager.
And
I
you
would
continued?
Have continued, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I got married and I was still involved in it. Like I was still going to Mass. I hadn't intentionally given up my faith. I was still going to Mass on Sundays, but I was drifting. I was drifting away, slowly but surely drifting away from God. And I didn't realise it. I did start to miss Mass. I did start to drift further and further away and started to experience panic attacks and anxiety. So to be honest, I got into a very bad state. I was so bad that I couldn't leave the house. I would cry in the house most of the day because I had a fear of trying to get out to the school to pick up the children from school because I didn't know how I was going to drive down the road.
About you said several years had passed, so the first negative reaction you began to feel in yourself was, say, quite a few years after starting.
Quite a few years after starting, yeah, as I got deeper into it and delved more into heavier things.
And would you relate this to what particular practice or to all the practices in general?
It was an accumulation of all of the practices because it was flooding my whole self with, I was walking completely in the opposite direction to God, and it was an accumulation of all the practices because the more mediums and psychics and holistic healers as such that I were going to, the more spirits were being attached to me. I was under attack from evil spirits because I felt an evil spirit around me.
Did you actually feel, you felt and you were sort of conscious of an evil spirit?
I was, yeah. When the panic and the anxiety got worse, I felt like a presence on my left side and all up the side of my head. And I just couldn't get rid of it. I just felt there was something there and I didn't like the feel of it. So that's what kind of upset me. When I wake up in the morning, it was still there and it wouldn't go away. Eventually, I told people about it. Nobody really understood what I was saying. I had no one really to give me an understanding of what it might be. I suppose I'm not a person who goes to doctors, so as a last resort I went to the doctor and I said, look, I'm suffering from panic, I have anxiety, I have this, there's something wrong with my head, I have a feeling on my head. So of course when I said I had a feeling around my head, he said, like, a feeling, is it a pain? No, it's not a pain, but there's something here that I just can't get rid of. So I suppose it wasn't his area to talk about, but he did write me a prescription. So I tried to take them for about 2 or 3 days and I said, no, I'm not having this. I know this has nothing to do with me needing to take medication. It's something that I have to get rid of.
And how did you propose to get rid of it? And did you associate it with what you were doing at the time?
Oh, I didn't really associate it with anything I was doing because I just thought I needed to try something else. I needed to try another therapy that would clear this, that would get rid of this from me. So I was going from Billy to Jack, basically, to try and get rid of this, which was leading me even worse, into a worse state because I wanted to get rid of this presence.
And did you mention this to a priest at the time?
I was led to have deliverance prayers said over me, and that's what I needed to have. And that came about as a result of a friend of mine who was watching the Late Late Show one night. She came over to me the next day and said, we need to go to Glenbrine. And I said, what do we need to go to Glenbrine for? She said, the Friars of Myross are coming to Glenbrine. They were on the Late Late Show and she said, we need to go to Glenbrine. And she said, I need to bring you to Glenbrine Church.
she was a close friend of yours.
She was a close friend of mine, and she had become involved in it as a result of me. So I had engaged her in this activity as well.
She felt that both of you needed help, or she just felt you needed help?
She probably felt more so. She knew more so that I needed help, because she saw me in the state that I was in. Some days I'd say, just, will you come up to me? I can't get out of the house. She saw me, in an awful state, crying, and just in an awful state of panic. So she knew that I needed help. And she knew that the friars of my Ross were the ones that we needed to go and see.
And you went to see them?
And we went to Glenbrine, and we walked into the church in Glenbrine, and the altar was beautifully lit with candles. And the minute I walked in, I just felt safe. I felt Jesus is here. There's something safe about this place, this beautiful church. And when the friar came out, one of the first things he said was, Jesus is present. I felt instantly, I'm safe. I've arrived in a safe place now. And I thought, this is it. I don't have any panic. I don't have any anxiety. I knew that I was making my journey back to God.
And so following that experience, what happened next?
So in the church that evening, the homily, as it turned out, was all about New Age. We had an individual blessing with the Blessed Sacrament. Afterwards, then at Mass, we spoke to the priest. He was the one who said, do you have any health issues as a result? We said, we've been involved with New Age. And I said, I'm suffering from panic and anxiety. I can't leave the house. So he said, you need to come and see me. I'm in Bunclody the next day. You need to come down, and you both need to have deliverance prayers said over you. And you need to come for a confession. So the next day we went to Bunclody Church, and we had the Blessed Sacrament there. It was just ourselves and the friar, and he brought out the Blessed Sacrament. We had deliverance prayers said over us, and we had a full confession.
And did you right away leave all the different practices you were doing?
From there on, I knew I needed to go in a different direction.
You did, at this stage, you did realise, you'd understood.
I'd understood that.
That this feeling, this sort of evil presence you had was caused by the different things you were doing in New Age.
I was still so clouded by it. When I wasn't involved in it, I didn't have panic. When I was at Mass, I felt safe. I had no panic, no anxiety. Mass was my breathing space, and that's the way I would describe Mass. Mass was where I could just breathe. I could just be safe. I could be still with the Lord. And I was like just resting in his arms at Mass. That was the journey back. And then another incident happened just shortly after that. I think it might have been as close as the following weekend or the 2 weekends later. Got this feeling that I needed to go to Ferns. And very strong, just you need to go to Ferns. And I didn't understand, why do I need to go to Ferns? I don't have a connection in Ferns. And what came to me was, you may go down and get your hair done. So I'd randomly, never been to a hairdresser's in Ferns before, but was so strong on my mind that I said, okay, I'll just go down. I'll go down to Ferns. I'll go down to the hairdresser somewhere down there, and I'll have my hair done on this, I think it was a Saturday morning. And I went down, arrived at the hairdresser's that I was thinking I was going to have my hair done, and it was closed. So I said, okay, sure, I'll wait. I'll go over to the church and I'll wait in the church. So I went into the church and Mass was just starting. So I stayed for Mass, and after Mass there was a lovely group of people there, and they were about to say the Rosary, and they turned around to me and said, would you like to join us for the Rosary? And I said, yes, I would, thank you. So I stayed for the Rosary. Again, just felt, a little piece of heaven, because I'd no panic, no anxiety, praying the Rosary, lovely people there. And afterwards, one of the members of the group spoke to me and chatted with me, and I just said I'd come down, told him a little bit of the story, told him a little bit of background where I'd been involved in New Age, and he told me out straight. He said, it's idolatry. You need to get out of that immediately. You need to go to Mass, and you need to, stay close to the sacraments. So hearing those words, it's idolatry, was like, oh my gosh, this is serious.
Really, when we get into that sort of stuff, we're breaking the first commandment.
We're breaking the first commandment.
We're putting all these things in the place of God, thinking exactly that these practices can lead us to God, and it's in fact they lead us totally in the opposite direction.
Yeah, exactly. We're leading us totally away from God, away from the source of our life and our, goodness and everything like that. So that was when I heard out straight, it's idolatry, and it was very serious. So people there said to me, look, we're here every morning. We pray the rosary after Mass and we say the Divine Office. So you're welcome to come down and say the Divine Office with us. Just knew by the feeling that I had when I was there that I felt so safe, and I felt such a comfort in the Mass and in prayers that I went down to Ferns every morning, most mornings probably after the school run for Mass and for Divine Office, Rosary and Divine Office, and I was strengthened by Divine Office prayers. I was nurtured back to health, really, spiritually. I was nurtured back to my spiritual health through the Divine Office, through Mass and Rosary.
Spiritual and psychological and emotional
psychological
health.
And emotional, yeah.
Which
absolutely.
I suppose is what you were looking through, all the things you were doing.
Yeah.
But you came full circle back to when you were a child.
Yeah, I came full circle.
And back to the sacraments.
Back to the sacraments and back into close contact
you were
with
being
God.
You were being born again.
Yeah.
You're beginning again, which is beautiful. That's a sort of staple of conversions, certainly in my own case, that you suddenly find you've been chasing your tail for years.
Yeah.
Looking in all the wrong places to be happy.
Exactly.
And you come back and you find that the happiness was when really that childlike, beautiful, innocent happiness you had when you made your first communion.
Yeah, exactly.
And the amazing thing is that God has the power to bring us back to that.
Yeah.
And it's everything's gone.
Everything is gone. And you know yourself, you've had experience of being without God in your life, not having Him there.
It's an emptiness and this sort of, although I was never involved in New Age or anything like that, but the fact of looking for God I never even thought I was looking for God, but looking for satisfaction, for contentment in all sorts of places, rather than the right place. And when did you ever get to the stage through this process where you suddenly realised that what the man had said about it being idolatry, did you actually realise it was? Did you get to the stage where you said, oh wow, I really offended God? I
just felt numb. I couldn't feel anything. I couldn't feel much emotions because I felt I was just numb from it all. I suppose I had weakened my mind really, and my mind was strengthened back up again by the church, by Mass and by the prayers and Rosary. I was strengthened again. I came back to make clearer decisions, and I realised it was idolatry. I used to go to the toddler group, and there was a load of books there, and they said feel free to borrow a book, and one of the books was Gods of the New Age by a lady called Carol Matriskiana. I read that book and I thought, very serious. I'm in serious trouble.
And in a church?
And it was in the Quaker Hall in Enniscorthy, because we had a baby group there every week, and I used to go to meet the other mothers in the Quaker Hall there, and the book just kind of jumped out at me, and I borrowed it and read it, looked up the lady who wrote it and read about her story about New Age and her involvement, and she was warning people big time.
Did it all affect you also physically?
It actually did, David, yeah, it did affect me physically. When I had gone to the doctor, I had bruises. I had come out in bruises on my body. Yeah, you've just reminded me of that now. It's been so long since I've spoken about this, but I had bruises, unexplained bruises on myself that just appeared with this presence that was around me.
You related the bruises to the presence?
Yeah, absolutely. There was no other reason why bruises would just appear on my body. There was just no reason why they could have just appeared.
You didn't have any bangs?
No bangs, nothing. They just appeared, and that's when I got scared. I knew it was evil. I just didn't feel right, and the doctor couldn't explain the bruises either. So all of that disappeared when I had the deliverance prayers, and when I came back to Mass, back to the Divine Office, back to Rosary, back to God.
Well, he is the answer.
He's the answer,
He is the answer.
And
certainly our hearts are restless.
Our hearts are restless
until we find Him, until we rest in Him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I felt like I was like crying out to Him from the wilderness, because I just thought, God, I've tried everything. Nothing is working. This panic is not going away. I've called out to you. I get down on my knees at home and just say, Lord, please help me. Just please help me. Just take this away from me. Get me out of this. Just please help me. And He did, through those series of events that happened. By getting me to Ferns, that was the Holy Spirit's voice. I felt it so strong that I followed it, because I said, I don't know why I need to go to Ferns, but I do. And Ferns was the stepping stone back for me.
Thank God.
Thank God
for that.
And I'm so grateful to everybody, who I met along the journey, people who have been so kind to me and who have informed me. Most importantly, we need people who are going to inform us of these things. And that's why I would hope that if there's anyone out there listening that they would understand the dangers of this. It's a turning away from God, it's a moving in the opposite direction, and you're allowing evil forces to come into your life, taking the place that only God can fill in your life.
You're looking for liberation, you're becoming a captive. You're actually becoming a captive.
You're becoming a captive, exactly. Yes.
I saw something the other day on YouTube, a thing called Exposing Yoga, Qigong and Transcendental Meditation.
Yes.
It's an English lady who's speaking, and she speaks from her heart, because apparently she had this kind of a podcast and a YouTube channel and everything for years.
Yeah.
Advising people, encouraging people to get into all these different practices. Above all, yoga was her thing. And by the way, I discovered yoga means yoke, because you're tied, you're yoked. And it's so apparently innocent. I mean, I personally always thought it was perfectly okay. It was just like stretching, not that I ever did it, but like stretching, and I think that's very good. And you think that's relaxing and all that. This lady finished up so badly that she was making this program, took her weeks to be able to make it, all kinds of interference, so before she could make the program, telling her followers that to get out of this, to stop.
Yeah,
that
that's it.
She'd found the answers. One day I sort of related to something you said a few minutes ago, that you had these panic attacks and you couldn't leave the house.
Yeah.
And she was so bad that she threw herself down the floor of her kitchen, and without realizing what she was saying, she said, "Jesus, help me." And by the name of Jesus, she was delivered. From that moment on, she said, everything changed. She said what you said about going into Mass. When you went to Mass, she felt protected.
Yes.
Because she said that the more you get into, in her case, yoga, and I think maybe other things too, you feel that it's a process and you're going to get better. Yeah. So you try something else.
Exactly.
It's a work in progress. You think, well, I'm feeling bad now, but I'm going to be feeling good.
Yeah, you think it's all part of the process. You're going to feel bad and then you're going to feel good after it.
That's what this lady said on her program. It struck me as something. So it's sort of, you've been pulled in. But she had no idea how. Well, she did explain how she said, called out to Jesus. She had no faith at all whatsoever.
Yeah.
But a friend of hers had been praying for her. School, kindergarten, girl she'd been at since baby school, and was still a very good friend of her. And she thought she was wacky because she was a real Christian and never left the Lord. But she said she was sure she called out to Jesus because of the prayers of her friend.
Yeah.
So by the name of Jesus, we are saved, we are healed. He is the way, the truth, and the life.
Absolutely.
Patricia, it's been a joy listening to you. It's wonderful to hear your testimony. Thank you very much for giving it.
And thanks very much, David. It's an honour to share it, and I just think that it's important to share, because there could be people out there who are feeling the way I felt, and that they just need to turn back.
The parable of the lost sheep is one that I can identify with, because I feel I was the lost sheep and the Lord left the 99 and came after me. He sought me out, he found me, and he brought me back.
Well, thank you, Patricia.